Florida overcoming a deficit there against Houston, and they win by the hair on their chinny chin as they get a 65-63 win in the NCAA men's title game, decided by Clayton, who did not make a basket in the first half, but he was being credited with a defensive play there at the end, stopping what would have been a game-winning attempt. They didn't even get the shot off Houston, and so down goes Houston. Clayton finished with only 11 points, just 3 of 10 shooting from the floor for Florida, but it did not matter. And that defensive play is what you'll likely remember if you remember this game at all. And if you remember this game, you likely either went to the University of Florida or have a relative that went to the University of Florida, or you live in Florida. Other than that, probably not. Probably not. And Clayton, the most outstanding player, the NCAA tournament most outstanding player, so he picks up the hardware. Congratulations to Florida. They win another national championship, first time since the Billy Donovan days, long, long ago, and they will be serenaded and have their ass kissed. Congratulations on that. They can do the Gator Chomp. I saw them. They were doing the Gator Chomp. I haven't seen the Gator Chomp since, like Tim Tebow's days, it seemed like. It's been a while. So they were doing the Gator Chop. They had the orange and the blue confetti coming down there, and celebration. But for our purposes, you know where I'm going with this. Yeah, the better story is in the losing locker room, and so that is where we were going to focus our attention here, and let us discuss the question for the esteemed panel, which you are part of. How much of this loss falls on the shoulders of Houston coach Kelvin Sampson? That was one of the storylines coming in. The grizzled, the lifetime basketball coach. He'd seen and done everything. And this was his moment to win the championship, Kelvin Sampson, and run off into the sunset and celebrate. So instead of that, how much of the loss falls on his shoulders? So I've got Brett Michaels, Shakespearean, and duffel bag. And we will combine all of these things together, and we will go on the power play, because it did seem like the Florida Gators, when they put on the afterburners, they were on the power play. But that is not the question. The question was how much of this loss falls on the shoulders of Kelvin Sampson. And the entire game, it looked like we could start the show by saying, the Cougars are coming, right? That famous Fox Sports Radio commercial from years ago. And right when you thought it was the turning point, they took a nap. They took a nice snooze. The Houston Cougars, they took a snooze. Houston led by 12 points in the second half. Now, 12 is not a lot, but the ineptitude of men's college basketball, the absolute incompetence of how these people play the game, you would think 12 points should be enough, but it really was the story of the tournament. Auburn had a decent lead in their game on Saturday. They blew it, right? They blew it against Florida. The Duke Blue Devils had a sizable lead against Houston. They blew it in that game, and then it's just the theme in San Antonio as Houston also seemingly with that lockdown defense had the game in control, and it obviously did not work out quite that way. But here's the deal, right? So Houston, now the school's never won a men's basketball championship, and this team ends up taking a position behind the famous Phi Slamma Jamma teams of the 1980s as a bridesmaid, unable to get it done. But the buck does stop with Kelvin Sampson. All right. Now, the players are the ones that futzed around on the court, but the college game, you say the coach is the one that's supposed to draw up the brilliant play. It wasn't a helter-skelter play. You had time to design something, and you could not even get a shot up. That is a cardinal sin. And you can like Kelvin Sampson, you can praise Kelvin Sampson, you can celebrate Kelvin Sampson, but you got to get a shot attempt up. You got to get a shot. Is that too much to ask? Is that too much to ask? And it's in some ways it is symbolic that the men's basketball tournament ends up like this because Kelvin Sampson at the end, he's getting up there, 69. So Kelvin Sampson at the end of the game, he's standing on the sidelines, and he's got, I'm trying to paint the picture for you if you're blind. So he's got his hands on his hips. He's motionless, right? There's no movement there. And he's got this blank, dazed and confused look on his face like he's trying to figure out the time-space continuum. And that moment right there, that was symbolic because his team was motionless as it turned out at the very end there, Houston, to quote the great hockey coach, they sucked at a time they could not suck at the end. And it was like a classic from Bret Michaels' younger days there. Bret Michaels coming up back in his Poison days with a Every Rose Has Its Thorn, right? That tune, Every Rose Has Its Thorn, because Houston, they got a bunch of roses for what they did against Duke, right? They got a lot of roses there. Everyone's, congratulations, you won the game. And then on Monday night, they picked up the thorn. They grabbed the thorn. They got the nice part of the rose, and they picked up the thorn on Monday night. A fitting ending to the Cougars season. Could not even get a shot off to win, as the kids say, the natty. The basket wins the game. Couldn't do it. And this kid for Houston, Emmanuel Sharp, stopped right in the middle of the shooting motion as he tried to get the game-winning shot up. There were about, I don't know how many seconds. There were a few seconds to go in the game. There weren't very many seconds. And so he dropped the ball, and once you drop the ball, you can't touch the ball. You can't pick it up. You'll be called for traveling. Did it not seem, and I had no skin in the game on this, but did it not seem like this was like a 7 or 8 minute thing? It was only a few seconds, but the ball just dribbling and no one touching it. And then you're like, what the F is going on? This is to win the championship. You can't touch it. Where the hell's your teammates? No one can touch it. And like, what are you doing here? And then finally, Alex Condon came over there and dived for the ball, and he flipped it forward. And that's it. Buzzer sounds. And turn out the lights. The party's over. See you later. Now, page 2. So, Florida coach Todd Golden becomes the youngest head coach to win a national championship since Jim Valvano. Now, if you're old, you know who that is. Jimmy V. He was a TV commentator, died at a young age. But Jim Valvano was 37 way back in 1983. A team called North Carolina State won the championship. And so Todd Golden at 39, the youngest coach since then to win the championship. So what does the future hold in the crystal ball for Florida coach Todd Golden? So if you look, and as a distant relative of Nostradamus and friend of Nostradamus, we're never wrong about these predictions. But the answer is Shakespearean. In my crystal ball, Shakespearean, and it was a line from Shakespeare. The world is his oyster at this point. Yes, you would say absolutely the world is his oyster. He's 39. He's at the very pinnacle, the summit of men's college basketball right now. And his name, it is poetic. Golden. Yes, as in gold bullion, which will be coming his way. A lot of gold bullion. Todd Golden is entering Boomtown, USA. Boomtown, USA. And a stampede of wealth. Money, money, money. Yeah, it's all coming his way. He's already making a lot of money, but it'll be a bigger bonanza, bigger slice of the pie. At worst, he's going to get a new contract and more money, money, money in Gainesville. And he'll be moving out of the treehouse abode. And he'll be moving into a nice rustic cabin. And why not? Right? He's got the elevated stilts on that rustic cabin, and he'll be good to go on that. And you got the swamp there, so you can withstand the rising waters of the swamp, and he'll be in good shape. And he can also, if he wants, run off to the NBA. That's what the last Florida coach did that won a couple of championships. Billy Donovan, he's still in the NBA. He's had a long run in the NBA and hasn't won anything. He's still hanging around. All right, now last word. So the player of the tournament. The outstanding player of the tournament, a guy named Walter Clayton Jr. So, will Walter Clayton Jr. have his NBA draft stock rise up? Will it skyrocket to the moon? To the moon! Because of this historic tournament. So, we've talked about this in previous episodes of the show. We've discussed this, you and I. We've had this conversation, and I would not use the word skyrocket. I believe that would be the wrong word. I believe that would be the inappropriate word. That is not the word I will use. My word is uptick, as in it registers a mild uptick, right? A mild uptick. Now, right now, there's that afterglow, and everyone's all excited and all that because the game just happened. Clayton, he does pick up a nice big duffel bag, the kind of duffel bag that you'd have to pay for if you go on like Spirit Airlines because it's too big, and they charge you for it because it doesn't fit where it needs to fit, and they say you can't carry that, and you get upset, and you're like, well, I don't want to pay for it. It's a carry-on. He said, well, we're not allowed to do that. You got to pay for it. So it's a big duffel bag, and it's got extra Aura points in it. So you get extra Aura points. Congratulations on that for being the NCAA men's basketball tournament outstanding player. Now, that said, you and I both know, every man, woman, and child knows the panache that you get. It's a fun word to say. I like the word panache. I don't use the word panache enough. So you get that panache, but that only goes so far. Like, you're only able to go so far when you have that panache. And if you look at the lead in here, Clayton, who's the star of the tournament, even though he didn't have a basket in the first half, he was projected as a second-round pick prior to the tournament. They had him as a second-round grade, the NBA scouts. And the issue here is you've got an age problem. Now, he's not old, but he has been around for a while at Florida. He's a senior. There's some other factors involved in this also. The fact that he is a senior and he's had access to NBA talent evaluators for a couple of years. They're not exactly salivating at getting their hands on him in the NBA. His skill set appears to be a dime a dozen by NBA standards, and we'll see whether or not he can convince them to maybe get a late first-round selection because he had some big moments in the NCAA tournament. And I know in football, you win the Heisman, you get drafted a little higher, there's a little more you can sell on the player. Now, here's the question, how much did this championship for Todd Golden and friends cost? How much did Florida have to spend? Because remember, there's no salary cap in college basketball. So how much did they have to spend to win the men's championship? And I did as much of my research as I could. I searched around. I tipped some rocks over. I bounced all over the place. And the exact figure on how much Florida spent on name, image, and likeness is a unknown. Right? It's not publicly disclosed, so we're not exactly sure how much they spent. The every detail is not documented on that. These schools have these collectives, these kind of weird shadow government operations that pay the money, and so it's hazy. The estimate is that it cost Florida like $2.5 million. I think it cost them more, but that's the ballpark figure, $2.5 million salary cap for Florida to win the championship and NIL money and all that. But the portal, it's the power of the portal, not the power of the people. It's the power of the portal.